Hi everyone, and welcome to another Fireside chat with me, Madeline Thomas, Content Lead here at WTIN. So joining me today again is our Digitalisation Lead, Otis Robinson. But today he's joining us from the UK once again, not from Tech Textile as he was last time. He joined us from a kind of a bit different live fireside chat last month, live from Tech Textile. So if you didn't see that one, do have a look on the new look WTN.com. That was a really great discussion. So hi Otis, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
No problem. So today, myself and Otis are going to be discussing a special report that we at WTIN published just yesterday. So it's the second edition of the Innovation Outlook, and this quarter it is focusing on advanced manufacturing. So similar to the first edition, the report assesses technologies and maps them onto our commercial readiness scale as either emerging, scaling, or commercially ready. And the report is broken down into key themes within advanced manufacturing that we felt are areas as full of innovation. So these three key themes are 3D printing, fabric gripping, and end-of-life processing. So first of all, Otis, I guess, do you want to kind of talk us through why advanced manufacturing, why we chose it for our Innovation Outlook, and also perhaps you could talk us through these three key themes and why we kind of decided to look into these more deeply.
Yeah, so obviously following, a close look at materials in the previous Innovation Outlook, we thought it's important to kind of switch gears a little bit and look into new technologies and advanced manufacturing. The topic is incredibly important because Industry 4.0, or the fourth industrial revolution, as it's sometimes called, means we're in the kind of middle of a transition period in manufacturing, where processes are becoming more connected, resource efficient, and digitalized. So it's also especially important in an industry such as ours, which is very stubborn and pollutive. So we take a look at some technologies within the textile and apparel manufacturing supply chain that breaking boundaries when thinking about sustainability, processes, and waste. So, overall, as you mentioned, we investigate innovations, but we investigate innovations at chronologically placed checkpoints along the textile and apparel supply chain. So we offer, editorial analysis, context around specific innovations, and an indication of a technology's commercial readiness. It's just a great report for anyone looking to, support or upend traditional manufacturing processes with these new technologies, to stay ahead of the curve. So obviously, as you mentioned, the first thing we look at is 3D printing. Should I just dive right into?
Yeah. Talk us through that, please.
So obviously, I have a habit of talking a lot about 3D printing. I think in the last one I spoke about 3D printing. In the last Fireside chat, I spoke about 3D printing. It's one of the most interesting areas that is infiltrating textile and apparel manufacture. But we pay attention to these developments for good reason. First of all, it's an incredibly lucrative industry. It's grown from a $5 billion industry to a $30 billion industry within 9 years. And when we look at other industries like automotive, engineering, medical and education, 3D printing has proven itself to be an integral part of contemporary processes. But textile and apparel is only kind of just on the cusp of understanding its potential. Not only in manufacturing, spare parts or replacement machine parts, but in printing garment, and shoe component parts, embellishments or accessories, or even, just printing entire textiles from scratch. So in this Innovation Outlook, we take a look at the various application areas of 3D printing, including garments, textiles, footwear, and backpacks. So we take a close look at how 3D printing technologies can improve the sustainability of these end products, or in general increase production efficiency and sustainability by ditching traditional processes. So we also look at the technological innovations around these application areas with specific technological examples or case studies of the technologies in action. So for example, we looked at Helos, which is a zero waste manufacturer of footwear. And the company uses a range of additive manufacturing technologies. There's some provided by HP, BASF Forward AM, and AMT. And they use these technologies to develop new forms of shoemaking. So with the examples provided in the Innovation Outlook, we can see that Helos's 3D printing shoemaking process actually cuts CO2 emissions by 48%, according to an academic investigation. It's also said to cut water consumption by 99%, which is huge. So we explain in the report how this is possible through these technologies, but this is just one example of how the Innovation Outlook offers insights into the potential of unique technologies in the industry. So then we switch gears and we look at automated fabric handling. So what's incredibly important to advanced manufacturing is automation, which is often a very broad category. But for this Innovation Outlook, we take a close look at material handling automation. So when we think about the global manufacturing industry, the textile industry's peers are way ahead of the use of robotics in the manufacturing line. So if you think about the automotive industry, for example, robots do a large proportion of the work, whereas what's particularly interesting is that originally the textile and apparel industry was at the forefront of the Industrial Revolution, but now it lags behind in terms of robotic adoption. But it's not, through lack of trying. It's these barriers to adoption, largely limitations in fabric handling. So that's what we chose to focus on. So fabric handling, which is the process that comes after the cutting process, is difficult to achieve because textiles are so flexible and robotic grippers are not currently precise or sensitive enough to fully mimic human dexterity. So this is a unique bottleneck because it's rare that in a fast digitalizing industry that an automated solution is not more efficient than its manual human equivalent. So what we see here is actually that it's often easier to have humans handling fabrics during the sewing process. So with this topic, we'll look at the technologies that are overcoming this barrier, and to see how automated fabric handling might be a better alternative to traditional processes. So for example, some of the benefits that we highlight in the report, some of the benefits of automated fabric handling include, efficient processes, less risk of human strain or injury, supporting new sustainable business models such as on-demand manufacturing, and just creating an overall flexible manufacturing environment. So one example of one of the innovations in this space is a company called Sober, which offers a system to enable the robotic sewing of garments via robot arm technologies that work in conjunction with a sustainable chemical solution that actually hardens the textile and all garment panels to allow the robotic gripping to function successfully. So, this is a great example of the forward-thinking nature of the Innovation Outlook, which examines, these emerging technologies that may require, just a little bit more further attention from the wider industry before they can be fully industrialized to solve, a particular issue. So then finally, we look at end-of-life processing. So we chose to look at end-of-life processing because there's a huge problem in that our industry is massively unsustainable. For example, 85% of all textiles thrown away in the US are either dumped into landfill or burned. Meanwhile, 92 million tons of textile waste is created annually, which is a gargantuan amount of waste. While other solutions, such as 3D printing, seek to offer on-demand manufacturing models and hope to reduce the amount of textile waste created, there is actually an opportunity for industry to also address the waste that is created. So we look at end-of-life processing to see how textile waste can be potentially recycled or upcycled to enable material circularity in industry. The transition to circularity has been described as incredibly crucial by plenty of industry critics and stakeholders. So, this is a great and essential focus for the Innovation Outlook to look at, one that I'm sure many brands and manufacturers will find valuable as they maybe, face pressures to become more sustainable or genuinely want to take the lead and implement material circularity. So one of the examples that we look at in that area is that we look at a couple of innovations that allow the separation of cotton blend textiles so that the fibers can be recovered and reused. We also look at a company called PickVisa, which offers an automated textile recycling sorting solution. We also look at a company called Resortex, which offers a unique dissolvable thread and heat system that allows garment disassembly for recycling and upcycling. So, these are some really great insights into processes and technologies that, can increase responsibility for brands and manufacturers in handling their products after end use. And it's also a great look into how circularity is actually plausible, even for an industry that, is halted by its own traditionalism. But yeah, that covers basically the entire breadth of what we look at. Obviously, there's much more to dive into in the actual report, but that is my very long-winded summary.
It wasn't long-winded at all. In the end-of-life processing section, there are a couple of patents that we've picked out. I mean, there are there's a lot of patents out there on recycled fibres and the separation of fibre blends. But we chose those two in particular because we thought that they were quite interesting. How important do you think it is that we see these patents coming through and that we focus on these patents? Because, you know, on the I guess the commercial readiness scale that we look at, you know, where we've got emerging, scaling and commercially ready, when it comes to, say, emerging, these are right at the very, very beginning, you know, the infant stages of emerging. So, you know, we've only just kind of worked that into there. But why do you think it's so important for us to kind of look at these patents that are still very much in early development stages?
I think, you know, simply just because without paying any attention to those, you know, innovations that are just on the cusp, that are very fringe and that haven't been paid enough attention to yet, without paying attention to them, you know, they're never going to lift off the ground. And especially, you know, as you mentioned, these patents that we include in the outlook that look at end-of-life processing and circularity, that's a huge, huge conversation that's happening, yet there's not really much movement towards it. So when we focus on these, you know, these small players, these small ideas, these thought leaders, these small instances of emerging technologies, we can, you know, there's potential to actually generate some real change there.
Absolutely. And I think just the amount of patents that we are kind of seeing just emerge in this area is really interesting, and it's showing the kind of the way that the industry is going in, which is promising.
Absolutely, you know, there's limited responsibility when we think about end of life products. A lot of, like as I mentioned, you know, a lot of products, they go to landfill, they get burned. Consumers themselves throw them away. By looking into these, you know, these innovations, we can really, you know, we can generate a very circular model where these clothes are being funneled back into the industry, and, you know, we can, you know, achieve true sustainability.
Absolutely. And just going back to the fabric handling for a second, the automated material handling, do you envisage this kind of technology, you know, being used to help nearshoring or reshoring that movement? Or do you think that these technologies are going to be perhaps used in, you know, countries that are traditional manufacturing, just to enable flexibility and streamline those processes there, or a little bit of both, perhaps?
I think just at first, it's probably important to note that, you know, we still aware the technologies that can truly properly mimic human dexterity. So to imagine a full, you know, manufacturing chain that is free from human input is, you know, is quite a way away. However, if we, you know, imagine a perfect world, we've got this technology there, you know, there is thought that it could generate a bit more competition between Europe and traditional manufacturing hubs, because as Europe invests in these technologies, which is where a lot of the technologies are based around Europe and, you know, the Western world, they're able to then produce clothes or textiles with just one investment into a machine, and then a much cheaper and very quicker, very more efficient, sustainable process. And it generates a lot of competition. And these investments, you know, are often quite large in a new technology that, you know, innovates an entire manufacturing line. That could be an incredibly large investment for, you know, a traditional manufacturing company whose bottom line is quite hard to achieve. So yeah, there are predictions that it could, you know, create a lot more reshoring as the technology advances, but also create a lot more competition, and that could generate, you know, a very kind of unstable traditional manufacturing supply chain.
Okay, and I guess you've given a little bit of insight already there in speaking about those last couple of technologies. But as a, you know, industry specialist at WTN, could you provide us with your own insight on these future developments in these key areas, and how do you think these technologies and advanced manufacturing in more broadly is going to evolve in the years to come?
Yeah, so I think if I just look at 3D printing, for example, there remains, you know, a lot more focus to be placed on the development of 3D printing processes that can actually produce textiles, and that's a really interesting area because, you know, the raw material sector of our supply chain is incredibly energy consumptive, water consumptive. There's obviously a lot of critique about the sustainability of that sector. So if we found a solution where you could 3D print a textile from scratch, that could be incredibly beneficial, especially because it solves issues such as you don't need a supply chain. Then you could send a CAD file to a consumer who could 3D print their own garment from scratch. So yeah, there's definitely developments there. And then when we think about automated fabric handling, as I mentioned, we still await a lot of technologies that can actually mimic human dexterity. With solved sight, we can have sensors around a factory that can mimic human sight, but touch and pressure control and things like that is something that we're still on the cusp of. We're not quite there yet. And then obviously when we think about end of life processing, I think on the contrary to the other two technologies, it actually highlights how we are still quite an archaic industry. We still have a lot of overproduction running rampant, and waste is not properly managed. So, by paying attention to that, we can see that in the future there's huge opportunity to change the way we actually work from the ground up, from the beginning. When we look at the end, etc., etc. But I think when we think about overall, what the report kind of highlights is that it's really important that people recognize the importance of digitalization or advanced manufacturing in developing, as I mentioned, this sustainable and circular future. And I do look forward to seeing how these developments, make their mark on the industry and how industry can embrace this change. Because as we know, things like greenwashing is a massive issue, and many brands and manufacturers make claims about wanting to become more sustainable. But it's clear that many critics want to see industry, put its money where its mouth is and invest in these solutions and genuinely begin to shift towards an advanced, greener industry. So I think this, report is an important, catalogue of investment of innovations that can really build towards a unique future for our industry.
Perfect. I think that's a really good point to finish on. Thank you, Otis. Thank you for your time today and for your insights. Thank you everyone for listening. And you can find this edition of the Innovation Outlook on WTIN.com and any other, textile information needs as well. Thank you, everybody.